The year is 2014, and every single day, 45,000 men, women, and children are being uprooted by evil governments, wars, and statelessness. $45,000 a day is the highest number of refugees since World War II, and it rounds off to nearly 50 million a year.
The United Nations is currently in a state of emergency, unable to handle the people escaping their countries in mass quantities. UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Antonio Guterres, says, "We are witnessing a paradigm change, an unchecked slide into an era in which the scale of global forced displacement, as well as the response required, is now clearly dwarfing anything seen before."
But now, something else is coming, something that will change everything. Humanity has abused the system for too long, and soon we shall feel the full potential of what she, the Earth, is capable of.
Get ready for Casualties of Climate Change, in theaters a lot sooner than you would like to believe.
What is the problem, you might ask? Well, Reid is here to tell you about it.
Hey guys, I'm Reid Levi-Knock, residential expert on climate change, running for, and hitting my jaw on the table, and I'm here to briefly explain global warming and the upcoming repercussions. So, as many of you hopefully know, global warming is part of the left-wing communist agenda to overthrow the government and imprison the Koch brothers.
Another theory, of course, is that the mass amounts of pollution, beginning during the Industrial Revolution and continuing to this day, has created a greenhouse effect on the planet.
The massive holes in the ozone layer have slowly allowed the global climate to climb, which has begun to have drastic effects. The polar ice caps are melting, which raises sea levels and creates an imbalance in the thermohaline circulation in the oceans. This will cause new currents to emerge, which will then lead to a change in weather patterns. These new weather patterns are predicted to bring devastating storms to different areas and cause horrific droughts to occur in others. When these imminent happenings occur, millions of people will be uprooted from their homes and forced to leave.
Climate-forced migrations have been occurring since the beginning of time and have always had the capacity to reshape civilizations. Whether it is to be the famine in Canaan that forced Jacob and his sons to Egypt, or the American Dust Bowl, which happened a little more recently. The forced migrations that are predicted are an entirely different scale, one that will put a strain on every country to try and accommodate the hundreds of millions forced to migrate in the future.
Already, there are examples of environmental refugees all over the world. In Bangladesh, the commonly flooded country is experiencing greater floods over the past few years. These floods have been destroying crops, spreading diseases, and destroying homes. The UK government has already pledged to give a total of what is equivalent to nearly $110 million over the next 5 years to help the people of Bangladesh.
In Mexico and Central America, there have already been forced migrations due to precarious weather that hinders the ability of a sustainable agricultural lifestyle. For example, in 2001, Honduras suffered a crippling drought that affected a total of 250,000 people. And then within months, the entire countryside was flooded due to a tropical storm. Many of the farmers from the Central America area have already begun to leave their insecure lifestyle.
And these are just a couple of examples of climate-forced migrations around the world. And you might be saying, or at least thinking silently, who cares? I have no intentions on going to Bangladesh or Honduras. How will this affect me? Well, climate change will also affect places closer to home. For instance, Manhattan, the cultural and economic metropolis of the US, is predicted to undergo severe changes due to climate change. These include frequent and severe storms like Hurricane Sandy, heat waves, intense precipitation, and coastal flooding. All of these will definitely add to the number of environmental refugees.
So many people are outraged by this situation. Solar panels are being built all throughout the world, even in New Hampshire, which is a frozen wasteland that is cloudy half the year. We might as well be called Canada. Wind turbines are being built. Mini wind turbines are being built, which are like wind turbines, but small, and fit on buildings.
Companies are trying to find more efficient ways to turn salt water into fresh water, but so far that has left investors feeling salty. Relatively speaking, humanity isn't doing anything. As long as oil is under $50 a barrel, no one's giving a flying sweet honey iced tea on cutting back and the effects it has if we don't.
And there's so many regions all around the world that are at risk of disappearing, like the Solomon Islands, or the Maldives, or Fiji.
Don't forget about Canada.
We're talking about places we actually care about. It's not what we can do in the future, it's what we can do now. Many scientists warn of the point of no return. Dun, dun, dun. Which is when no amount of cutbacks on greenhouse gases will make a difference. The point of no return, dun, 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 is only 0.4 degrees away, meaning we will reach this point of no return, dun, 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 by as early as 2042. Usually we don't care about future generations, but we're going to be alive for this, so we actually need to care.
So as we're defining it, a globalization trigger is something that may happen in the future and can change thinking rapidly. And seriously though, what can change thinking more rapidly about our world than the fact that people are literally fleeing their disappearing and drowning homes?
Clearly, the issue of environmental refugees impacts globalization as an ongoing process. If your ignorant friends don't believe climate change is real because they don't care about polar bears or freaking Antarctica, tell them that they're in for a big surprise when thousands of environmental refugees come to their house seeking shelter.
If we adopt our dear friend Steger's belief that globalization, the process, is a movement towards one of globality, a world with tight interconnections and flows that makes most of the currently existing borders and boundaries irrelevant, Steger, page 9, then we can prove that the trigger of environmental refugees is the new flow that will make our boundaries even more irrelevant.
It's basically nature's way of forcing movement, forcing cultural assimilation, forcing migration, and eventually forcing globalization. Whether it is natural occurrences like flooding and droughts, or man-made occurrences like climate change and global warming, what is clear is that environmental disasters cause displacement of all people, resulting in a global flow that traverses borders.
In this flow can be characterized by 5 scapes, namely the ethnoscape. The ethnoscape, in fancy terms, is the landscape of persons, tourists, immigrants, refugees, exiles, guest workers. In regular terms, it's just describing the particular dimension in which the movement of people, including refugees, characterizes our process of globalization. According to the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs and the Internal Displacement Monitoring Center, what a mouthful, in 2008, climate-related calamities drove 20 million people from their homes, and that's more than 4 times the number of people who were displaced by violent conflict.
How do environmental refugees affect globalization as a condition then? We see globalization as a tide. You know how many people say a rising tide will lift all boats? Well, this rising tide will drown all boats. This metaphor is apt because climate change and global warming are environmental problems that will not stop at hurting only some people. They will hurt all people.
In terms of political globalization, this means governments will have to examine their own immigration and refugee laws. Will they allow environmental refugees to find a home in their country? Will your country take in people whose island homes have been submerged?
Also, the UNHCR and other organizations that involve multiple governments have to amend their definitions of refugee. Currently, a refugee is a person who is fleeing conflict or persecution. These definitions have to be amended to reflect people who are fleeing environmental disasters. Additionally, environmental agencies like the UNEP have to find a way to quickly and efficiently relocate those whose home countries are no longer fit for living due to environmental factors.
In terms of cultural globalization, people will be more and more aware of the interconnected nature of our global order as mass migrations will become the norm. Refugee status will be more and more accepted as a nationality, and the existent nationalities will lose their stronghold over their territories.
What this means is that the trigger of environmental refugees will lead to cultural ties, meaningful cultural hybridization, or perhaps even cultural convergence, eventually forming an imagined community or a global village. It does not matter which borders you used to live within. What does matter is the awareness of how small the world actually is and how easy it is to connect with people all around the world.
Thank you for listening.
Bye, everybody!